Welcome. I'm Brendan Wallace, the co-founder of Fifth Wall, and I am sitting here with Greg Smithies, a partner on Fifth Wall's Climate Tech Fund. So Greg, back when we started Fifth Wall, we would actually get asked this question quite a bit when we were fundraising. We'd say, prop tech is going to be massive. And people would say, prop tech? Like technology for the real estate industry? I don't even know what that means. It was actually very hard for investors or even real estate companies to understand how multifaceted the technology ecosystem is for prop tech. Now, with climate tech for the real estate industry, can you do the same? Can you unpack the different components of that and how they're applicable for the real estate industry?
Let's maybe just go through the stages of the life cycle of a building. The first stage of a building, which actually not a lot of people think about, is the raw materials that go into it, right? The concrete, the steel, the paints, all of those things that are going into building a building. We're looking at new types of materials that can go into them that have less carbon impact when they're being made, and some of them even are negative carbon. So we can think of replacing steel and concrete for something like a mass timber or a cross-laminated timber, which potentially, depending how that was grown, can actually be carbon negative, right? So we've got the materials that are going into the buildings. Then the next stage is the construction of that building. How are we actually building it? And there's two aspects here. The one is, how do we design that building in the first place? How are the architects thinking about building this so that, for example, the building can be more passively heated and cooled just by the elements, right? So we aren't spending as much through the life of the building on heating and ventilation system. So we've got software products that really help the design of the building to just be a long-term better building and cheaper building to operate. But then we've also got the technologies of how you construct that building. So things like better prefabricated materials and prefabricated assembly on site. This is something where we're seeing a lot of technologies come out of China. And I'm sure most of our audience will be familiar with these crazy videos of how China built all of the COVID hospitals in a matter of hours. They put up these massive hospitals because they were all prefabricated, right? So we're looking at new types of construction processes. Then into the operating stage of a building. And this is the 20, 30, 40, 50 years of life of that building when you're heating it, you're cooling it, you're lighting it. This is very pragmatic, boring technologies like the ones I've referenced before, like high efficiency HVAC systems, it's lighting, it's better insulated windows, it's things like that, right? How do we make that building cheaper to operate in the long run? And then there's a final piece of the life of a building that very few people think about, and this is the end of life. What do we do with that building when either we tear it down? Can we reuse that rubble and those materials in some way? But more interestingly, from a carbon perspective and also from a financial perspective, one of the cheapest buildings is a building that already exists. So how do we, for example, say take a parking lot after we have autonomous vehicles and we don't need parking lots anymore and convert that parking lot into, say, cloud kitchens for delivery food? Obviously making that up, right? But the end of life of what we're doing with all of these buildings in 20 or 30 years' time is also something we should be thinking about.
How do you help real estate owners navigate this new imperative to invest in decarbonization technologies?
So I think the main way that we can help is actually by helping the real estate industry help themselves, which is right now, they are already being pitched by many of these startups who have many of these future technologies that will help them, but they actually don't know what to do with those startups because the products aren't ready for them to buy. They aren't ready for them to deploy. And so a lot of these technologies are essentially being ignored. Those leads are being dropped on the ground. So essentially, we can act as that pipe that they can funnel all of the opportunities that they're already seeing, but they don't know what to do with, and they can't themselves figure out the wheat from the chaff through to us. And that's essentially our entire value add, is figuring out the companies where they do have technologies that really can be impactful, and more importantly, where they are businesses that in the long run could be massive, global, and scalable in order to be able to service our LPs' massive global networks of buildings, right?
And there's an obvious point there, which is that if you're an owner of an office building in London or in Tokyo or in Chicago, the way to save energy in your asset is probably not all that different. Meaning what seems absurd, like just plainly absurd, is for every single real estate owner on their own to have sustainability teams hunting in the field to solve the exact same problem over and over again, and expecting that they will, in that process, identify the emergent winners.
Absolutely. I'd like to think of it almost as performance-enhancing drugs might be illegal in sports, but in business, performance-enhancing drugs are encouraged. And essentially, that's what we are. We're a performance-enhancing drug for the entire industry by feeding them the technologies that are going to make them their businesses better.